Right. So Dr. Dave Camilleri is a lecturer at the Youth Research Collective within the University of Melbourne's Faculty of Education. And he has done research on BMX culture and definitely with youth and marginalised and disengaged young people so they can flourish through BMX for Life project. He looks at things like mental health, and he's just a really, really amazing person who we have today to introduce our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to hand over to you, Dave. And then at the end, our co-convener, Ben's going to talk a bit about SHRED. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that generous introduction. I would like to introduce firstly Yiyin, Dr. Yiyin Deng, and he's an academic from China who's published on BMX, some really interesting work, especially around polluted leisure. I think one of the most recent papers looks at BMXs in China and a festival that takes place there. So I really recommend you take a look at that to get a different perspective, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the comparisons between what we're talking about here in Australia and China sort of as we go. So welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Next up we have Dave Cragg, who is a BMXer and also an artist. I've heard that you've been in the scene for a very long time, and it's great to sort of have you here to, I guess, hear your perspective, bringing in sort of both worlds there from the sort of artist, but also the BMXer. So welcome, Dave.
Thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And next on the list, we've got Dermo, and I think anyone who is in Australian BMX knows who Dermo is, and definitely a personality, but awesome rider, and ridden so many different things, but also lately capturing the scene, doing interviews, taking videos of just the sort of participatory side of BMX, not necessarily competitions. And I think that's something we'll probably unpack a little later. But it's great to have you here, Dermo. So welcome.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Thanks for having me tonight, and let's get into it and talk some BMX. Let's go.
Awesome. And last, we've got Mike, Mike Vocco. People would know him again if you're in the Australian BMX scene, and known for sending it pretty big. I think you've done some crazy things on the BMX, but also an amazing rider. And I had the pleasure of co-authoring something with him. I think that was last year now. I think time goes pretty quick, and that's on the Lux BMX site. But just really sort of unpacking BMX and relationships and what that looks like. And so it'll be really good to hear from Mike this evening, and I think maybe picking up on some of those themes, but also going a bit further. So welcome, Mike.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for having me. Keen to get into these interesting topics.
Awesome. So basically what we'll do is we've got some questions or prompts that I'll sort of put to the group and as into the panelists. And so each panelist can contribute where they see fit, if relevant or not. But towards the end of the session, in probably about an hour and a half, we'll have questions, etc. So for the time being, if you could leave your microphone on mute, and then we'll have a chance to sort of all have a bigger chat anyway. So we'll get started. And I think first up, really thinking about spaces and the environment, and thinking about how physical environments, so urban or natural environments, but also socio-cultural environments. So thinking about the people and the rules and the culture, how does that influence how you ride your BMX and your experience of BMX? So I'll throw that to anyone, Mike, Dave, or Dermo.
You're up, Dermo. Get in there.
You got this one, man. You're up. You're on my screen.
I was brain not there because I was trying to send the link to all these people that were like, hey, please hang a link over real quickly.
Yeah. And I guess, just to sort of get you started, if we think about street riding in particular, when you go out and spot hunting, if you're riding around looking for a place, you know, there's certain places which stand out more than others. You know, there are some street spots which are famous, some aren't. But then on the flip side, if you think about trails where often there isn't necessarily anything there, but you're going there with your shovel, you're sculpting, you're curating, you're making this space, you know. And so I think as a BMXer, are these the sorts of things you've ever thought about? You know, is it something that you feel has influenced, you know, the choices you make when you ride?
Well, I guess when when I'm driving my car to work or even anything like that, you know, I'm just constantly looking. I don't stop looking. And where it be, I think about how am I going to jump off that, where someone else is going to be like, nah, you're not doing that. But each day I see the world different as a spot, or each skate park I don't stop staring, or, you know, or when I'm in my trails, I'm just constantly visualizing like what can go here, what can I do there, and, you know, like where something could be placed, you know, whether it be a tree, a rock, no matter what, you know. So there's a big part of like visualization every day as a BMX rider, like that other people don't see in general to what I see. So yeah, but everything's a spot, whether it be a gutter or a big hill or a roof drop or a rail or anything, you know, on the streets, you know. So yeah.
It ends up really taking over your mind. Hey, like you'll see a tree on the right angle and you're like, that thing's pretty much a quarter pipe, or maybe like the way the roots on that tree have bumped up the concrete in a certain way and there's a wall just close enough, and suddenly all these things interacting have created something that, you know, general public aren't looking at. And then it ends up being like such a disease of the mind almost that you start, you know, actively hunting for them, getting on Google Maps and looking like, where's water infrastructure? Where are all the big dams around this area? Are there spillways or, you know, large concrete mountains diverting water around that are actually rideable or skatable? Pools in people's backyards. Like you end up becoming like pretty much a trespasser, just trying to find that I guess, yeah, those uncharted things that no one else has gotten to yet.
Yeah, it's you can't turn it off. Like once you found that, once that disease has infiltrated the mind, it's like it's there. You know, I don't ride as much these days, family and that, but yeah, as Dermo said, you can't help it. That's just how you view the world. It's the lens in which you view the world, and it's awesome. Yeah, it's cool. You know, I could be sitting outside in the park at work with my friend who doesn't ride BMX, and there's just like little garden edge bed and it's got wax on it, and you're like, man, I could, like, you know, you tire on it or chinking it or something, and he's just like, you know, he's looking at the same thing and seeing something completely different. You might see it, you know, see the landscape materials. You know, that's kind of cool to be in that world of, you know, let's say like the Stranger Things world. You know, you're looking at it, but you're looking at something completely different at the same time.
Even those little visual languages that get left, you'll be like, oh, someone's been here already. There's some tire marks on a wall or some scraping off an edge of a ledge, or yeah, wax, like you just said.
Yeah, and interestingly, it reminds me of a story when I was at University of Sydney for a conference with my PhD supervisor at the time, and I saw some tire marks on the wall, and I said to him, you know, what do you think they are? And he's like, well, I've got no idea. And I said, well, they're tire marks. This is a wall ride. You know, people are coming from across here, and I started pointing out all these different lines that these people were taking. You know, and it was like he couldn't believe it. It was just like this whole other world, like you're saying, that it's just you're sort of not aware of, you know, and it's a really different way of interacting with the world and seeing opportunities to do something, you know, more than just like if it's a set of stairs, it's more than potentially just walking up and down them. It could be for someone the ending of their video part.
Yeah. And I think back to something that Dave said. It's there's just a strong sense of opportunity that comes through in that way of seeing things. Like something that really stands out were those. I can't remember what year it was, but there were these massive storms on the east coast of America, and it kind of destroyed all this coastline along the Florida coast. I think it was Trey Jones and his crew kind of went, deliberately searching and found just the most incredible spots out of destruction and erosion, and what would often be viewed as a negative. You just completely flip that, and it's like so exciting. If I knew about back in the day, if that happened in Australia and knew about it, we would have easily bought tickets and flown down to find this rubble and debris and this heap of shit to ride your bike on. It would have been amazing. It's it's part of it is it's not meant to be. As kind of as what's the word, like as
how transient they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you say a good point there where it's not meant to be ridden. And, and there's a sort of points out a distinction between the physical thing that's to be ridden and then the rules by society or the culture says that's not to be ridden. Because if there's a bank to walk, there's nothing intrinsic or there's nothing, like automatic to say that you shouldn't ride from that bank to wall. It's rules that people have said, hey, don't ride to that for one reason or another. But then what you're saying is then really pointing out the lengths that BMXers go to ride a spot. And often it's these places that are, like we said, if it's a dam or a weir or could be like an old quarry, or you want to find a place often where no one else is going to find you, especially if you're going to dig. And so you can end up in these sorts of places that are polluted. Maybe there's asbestos that's being dumped there, or just there used to be the squash courts. Do you remember the squash courts in Melbourne? I don't know if anyone had heard of those, but in the squash courts, there was a quarter pipe and wall ride and stuff. But there was a disused building and it was trashed, but inside it was an awesome place to ride. And I think it's making me think of Yiyin, your sort of work on polluted leisure and sort of looking at BMX, I guess, taking place in these different spaces.
Yes, thank you. Well, different from all the previous panelists who had shared more from a participant point of view, I actually do BMX related research from a non-participant perspective. And definitely in terms of this physical space where Chinese BMXers play their sports, it's kind of interesting. In my previous work, I've done research or non-participant observation in urban and suburban BMX practice. And particularly, I will take Shanghai, for example. When I just began my BMX research in 2016, I did my field work in SMP Skate Park. That is a specialized space for skateboarders and BMXers to practice their sport. And in last year when I did field work, actually the space to go to is a roadside park, which is an open space under the Middle Ring Road ramp. The BMXers practice their sports there. And this is definitely related to polluted leisure. I think these BMXers, they are not only victims of pollution by the space they play, but also I think it's kind of the creative. This space also opens another perspective to view how they practice their sports. They want to utilize city space that used to be abandoned to do creative work. This roadside park is BMX park is very interesting. They did graffitis on their ramps, and they practice all kinds of interesting. They have different events. Sometimes they watch, BMX competitions together. They have, commercial shoots. So it's definitely a change from the almost 10 years research have been done on BMX in China. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I guess it almost brings us on to the next point and talking about sort of community and culture. But I think, and something I'd like to pick up on next, but one thing I'd like to just tease out, I guess, and to hear from the riders, is around then, you know, how we're saying there's the sort of physical environment, but then there's the sort of, you know, the authorities, or we're not meant to ride that. You know, does that influence your decision to ride a spot? Like if, let's say, you find an awesome, I don't know, bank to wall ride, it's behind a fence, you know, does that sort of, does that matter?
I think that's often the thrill of the chase with street riding a lot of the time. Like it feels like so often these awesome spots are in schools, universities, funnily enough, where there's often security, there's often people stopping you from enjoying these places. I got really obsessed with the water infrastructure of New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Canberra, and found a couple of bits and pieces that had, from my knowledge, and still had not been ridden yet. And there was some big missions involved, like 6-7 hour drives out to the middle of nowhere for these large infrastructures that are used for like farming, basically. Like there isn't even populations out there. And yeah, basically breaking in, walking into these places, finding workers on site. And funnily enough, them being like, oh, you're interested in seeing the dam wall? Yeah, we love the dam wall. We'll take you on a tour right now. Being told all the inner workings of the place when there's no staff there. And then, guided back out of the place. And got told Sunday's the go, you know, when no one's in there. Not
Right.
knowing that I was planning on rock climbing in there with a bike and a good mate of mine, Ben Piggott, and riding it for the first time out of, you know, sat there for 60 years before anyone had managed to bother with it, and is now like one of the coolest pieces of concrete I've found so far. And just from that whole behind the fence is probably why no one had gotten in there yet to give it a go, but friendly smile and bit of a laugh with the people got us through.
Yeah, amazing. And that was just a one-off thing. You've just ridden that one time and then you haven't gone back?
Been there twice now.
Okay. Yeah.
A couple of other crew, a good mate of ours who's now passed, absolutely destroyed it. Went just so ham on it. Our mate Chowgi has, absolutely, like, getting to see someone in there at that level of riding was like better than finding it. Getting to see Chowgi air out the top of it. And a couple of other mates that have gotten in there and absolutely, torn it to pieces. And there's been a couple others like that, a few others that have gotten out too that, we weren't the first two, but definitely involved some sweet talking and some knowing of the hours to get into like these, you know, snowy hydro areas and other like huge water infrastructure, power infrastructure, dams and weirs and full pipes.
Yeah, awesome. And where do you think then, I guess sort of going then towards the community side, where does the sort of community you think come into that? Like if you ride something like that, and this is open to everyone, like if you find something that's really unique, do you sort of want to ride it and then hide it, or ride it and share it, or ride it, just take photos? You know what I mean? Like how do you sort of then share it with some close mates? Is there a sort of reasoning behind decisions like that, like with the spot?
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Like there's like, if new spots are opening, like everybody wants to hit it first, obviously. You know, they want to get what they can done. You know, you want to do your best stuff on that spot because somebody's going to come along and just do something even better anyway. But, you know, like spots these days are getting made out of just like crap stuff, you know, like crap material. It's just, you put one peg on it, it just gets destroyed. You know, all these dudes are doing crank arms and sprocket grinds and stuff. It is just ruining spots, you know, like, but so that's there again. You want to get out and you want to hit that spot first, but sharing it with people, that comes to it as well, you know, because, you know, dudes are just going to go there and like the spot could just get shut down straight away because, you know, like to the eye of the people, they don't see it as we're doing something that we love, that we're addicted to, that disease, you know. So they come out and they're like, you're disrespecting the spot, or like, well, the garden ledge or the rail or something. They don't understand it, that, you know, them going to play soccer on a Wednesday, that's what they do. They don't understand that's this is what we do, you know. So to the public community, like, they sort of, it's more better if they can understand that this is what we are doing, you know, like we're going out and we're hunting for spots, you know, like, and like I know like all this stuff around like my area now is all getting built. Like I'm just going in there, I'm breaking in there and just having a look. Like I'm not breaking in, like it's just, you know, I'm not a burglar, but I'm not a burglar, you know, but I just
stuff going on.
I'm jumping fences, man, and I'm like having a suss, you know, like, because the, you know, the next big curve wall ride, you know, is that could just be around the corner, you know. But like when you say like sharing a spot, sometimes people just want to like have that spot for themselves, you know. But with the internet these days, everyone just likes to share their stuff too, you know, and then constantly, where's this spot, message after message, you know, like the pool dudes will not give up their spot ever, you know, because that is trespassing, you know, like, you know, so they want it for them, they've cleaned it, they've done it, and props to them, that's cool, you know, like, but yeah, but, and it is always good, like when dudes from town, like out of town come in and stuff, it's always good to take them, you know, like so they can just see, and, you know, and you can share what, like what you found, and just to see what they can do on it as well, you know, that's another good thing. So
yeah, and it's really interesting, I guess, sharing that, and because then what I thought of was, yeah, like with trails, you know, and it in some part being similar in some ways, because there can be a sort of instability and a need to protect it and hide it, because, you know, if councils find them or whatever, but it's different to a pool, isn't it? Like where
it is completely different. Like having your own spot, you know, is gnarly. Like you've got to want it, you know, like Dave C has his own spot, I have my own spot, you have your own spot, you know, like, and you know yourself, you've got to want it. Like you're in there like 10 hours a day. Like I'm going to be in there from 8 o'clock tomorrow till the sun goes down, you know. I could be riding or I could be digging, whoever stops in, you know. Like I like it when people come in, it's fun, you know. Like also I like riding them, but it's also good when people come and hang out and help as well. But that's probably why most people don't like to allow people to come into their trails, because they're not about it like as much as like, as I say, myself or you or Dave C, you know, like you've got to want it. You've got to be in it 100%. There's no like just knocking one jump up today and then not coming back tomorrow, you know, like once a set starts getting built, you got to finish that set, you know, like, and
there's a level of commitment.
That's exactly right. It's a massive commitment level, you know, so you know, like you've got to want it, you know, for trails. Same as a pool as well. Like I've cleaned a couple of pools, you know, but they're just word of mouth, you know, this is the address, go here and write it, you know. But the people that find that, they don't want anybody to know, which is fair enough, you know, because they want to write it as long as they can. So
and do you think and this can go out to Dave also, you know, because and I'm not sure, Mike, if you've ever dug trails, but if you have, you're happy to answer. Do you see the difference, or have you felt the difference in yourself in that sense of place and ownership and belonging, like the difference between like a skate park and if you go to your local skate park, you know, you've got that sort of connection, it's your local, but then when you build your own jumps, there's a different sort of connection there. Does that sort of make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, so if like a public person comes into like my spot, I don't know if I'm on the right track by saying this, but
yeah,
I feel like if a kid comes in with his bike, I'm sort of like, I'm a bit standoffish because I don't know him. Is he going to go and tell his 40 friends? Are they going to come there on their stupid Saurons and wreck them? Or like, are they going to like just come and start knocking the jumps down and make them smaller so they can jump them, you know, like trails is a lifestyle, you know, it's not a hangout, if that makes sense, you know, like, but I'm all for, if they're keen, I'll welcome them, you know, arms open. Yeah, man, for sure, come out and help, you know, like you gotta like, that's the code, you got to keep it quiet, you can't just tell everybody, you know, like once people know, you know, cameras start coming out, you know, people start putting stuff on the interweb or whatnot, and you know, then councils find out, and you know, locals find out, and tree huggers find out, I guess, and they hate that, you know, like them type of people, the Karens of the world, you know. So we don't want Karens in there at all, because one mistake and just all it takes is one person, your spot's gone, you know. So
reminds me of a jam we had a few weeks back now. Dermo and a bunch of crew from his area and his spot rocked up, and it was best weekend I've had at my jumps yet. The place has just been like digging for the last 6 months, and then finally having a bunch of heads out there riding jumps and screaming and laughing made it all worth it. And a bunch of younger local crew rocked up on dirt jump bikes. And Dermo, God bless him, was like, at the end of the day, like, "Oi, by the way, you fellas want to help out here?" Because like these kids have been rocking up, and they're always like peeking over the bushes. Where's he up to? How much work's he done? Oh, we'll sneak in there when he's not there. And I catch them up there a bit, these little dirt jump kids, like 26-inch mountain bikes as opposed to a 20-inch BMX wheel. So slightly different culture. They all ride downhill bikes and stuff. And I think there's maybe a little bit more like entitlement in the mountain bike world, because it's just a lot easier to build mountain bike tracks. Like, not to say there isn't some awesome mountain bike track being built around the Illawarra where I am on in Wollongong, but these kids, after being not told off by Dermo, but kind of firmly like reminded that like this is someone's work, and are you guys keen on helping out? They've all started rocking up and helping out, and funnily enough, they're rocking up on their BMX bikes now. They're like, oh, we want to get accepted a little bit more, and someone's going in there and tidying the joint up. Someone went through and weeded the joint for me recently. I'm pretty certain it's this 13-year-old kid who killed it, and he started riding a BMX now instead of a mountain bike. And it's funny, like that gentle guidance, like, I don't know, maybe it was not that gentle. Like the kids were like, oh, whoa,
yeah, it was more of like, you know, like guidance, you know, because you put so much effort into something, and you just like, you don't want it wrecked, you know.
Perfect.
If they're gonna ride it, you know, at least help out. There's more to trails than just digging, you know. Like, you can cook food, man. You can go collect water, you know. You can, like you said, you can pull weeds out. You don't have to slave on a shovel, you know. I like digging because it keeps me fit, and I'm focused, 100% focused. I can just do my task and then come home, you know, like that's it. But it's more guidance for people that come in there, like teach them the way, you know, like they need to be taught the way, especially in the trail scene, because it's not very massive, the trail scene, and they're constantly telling people to get out. Like, where, as in, I know at my spot, if people want to come, man, you can come, but you got to want it. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to want it, because what if that person that comes in that I've invited, and they fucking go, holy shit, man, like this is what I want to do. Bang, trails for life. You know, that's, you know, then next minute you got another dude at your spot. So what I'm trying to say is open up and like let people in as well. I know it's hard, but you know, like you can't just, you got to pick and choose who you have in there, obviously.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's it. There's always a sort of, has been sort of gatekeepers or trail bosses, you know.
Crazy gatekeepers. That's right.
Yeah, and it is obviously because of the hard work, and you know, there's so much involved, and it's really complicated. And you know, and Tyson and I spoke about it, you know, on that Backbone podcast that we did. But it is really interesting, and even that sort of idea of the dry guy, and you know, like holding people accountable for not contributing and being inauthentic, which is really interesting. And you know, if like when you build trails, you know, there's this sort of sense of identity, and I think Dr. Wade Nelson, who's here actually, in one of his papers, sort of mentions that trail builders have this sort of extra respect, you know, and so it's not about how good you ride, but it's this sort of other way of valuing the contribution to the culture, and that's through building a spot. So you've got trail builders who aren't necessarily the best riders, but they're respected just for being killer builders. And, you know, it's another way of, I guess, gaining status in the culture, you know, and I think, you know, more broadly, one thing that BMX does pretty well is gives different people a place to sort of belong and to sort of plug in. And, you know, you don't necessarily have to be the best rider to be an important part of a team, like, you know, or a crew, like Dermo said. It's, you know, if you're cooking or you're weeding, but some dudes are videographers, photographers, you know, there's all these different things that people sort of do. And I guess then sort of opening it up, you know, to Mike, but even Dave, you know, with your art, it'd be good to know, it's good to hear how, I guess, you know, some of that, yeah, there's other sides of you that, you know, you identify, you know, as being an artist or a writer, you know, how that also impacts BMX and how BMX has sort of impacted those other parts of you.
Yeah, there's lots being said. I've got a lot of thoughts, a lot of thoughts building, backing up.
Go for it, wherever you want.
I guess right back to the start, you know, I wouldn't claim trails. You know, I used to build jumps around my home when I was like 10. You know, I don't think that doesn't really count, but I just wanted to make you know, you can really see how when you spend so much time in the bush, and you found it's like your little secret. And as Dermo and Dave talked about, you know, you put so much time into it. It just has there's so much meaning and identity attached to it when you put that much work in, and it just really feels like this little secret that you know that no one else knows, that gives you so much value, gives your life so much fulfillment. And in a different sense, you know, just thinking about growing up at the skate park, and everyone will have a similar tale. It's not something you've built. It's not so much a secret, but nonetheless, you've spent so much time. There's so many memories and stories, and you've met people there. Like Samson Ross is like one of my best friends still, and like I met him at the skate park back in the day, and you know, we might not have been friends otherwise. Like we're into other things, but bikes brought us together. And now whenever I drive past it or hear it, your mind instantly attaches to all these memories, and it's like and it makes you feel good. I don't know. There's just like there's an energy there, which is cool that can be generated from something like that. You know, even if you haven't built it, you've sweat there, you've spilled blood there. You know, yeah, so many cool things have happened that just reminds you of that place that otherwise wouldn't. You know.
Yeah, no, totally. Understand what you're saying, and yeah, you're building experiences there. It's like it becomes a catalyst for all this other stuff of friendships, and it's amazing who you end up mates with because of BMX. You probably wouldn't have been mates with otherwise, I think. And shout out to Flags out there, but yeah, Flags awesome. But you know, like it's a really interesting one, and I'll pick up on something that Dave said before, I think, about the mountain biking and about the way they sort of relate to environments also, which I think is a really interesting one in terms of the sort of transients, and even thinking about bike life as an sort of I think as an extension of BMX in some ways, like of street riding, but without a destination. It's just street riding, because what happens when you stop at a spot, usually you get hassled. So it's almost this, I think, evolution in sort of BMXing, where actually just sort of riding around. And we used to do bike life on our 20 inches when we were young. You have 10, 15 mates just riding around, everyone's doing wheelies, just cruising around, you know, and now it all just happens on big bikes sort of thing. But I think with the mountain biking, I see it as almost a very touristic thing, where just going from one place to another and just sort of riding it, going to the next place and just consuming it in that way. Whereas with trails, and when you get into the building, it's the opposite. It's going to this one place, getting to know it, you're curating it, you're basically creating this world, and it's not about just jumping from place to place. And there's a sort of deeper sense of belonging. And it'll be interesting then to hear from Yiyin about that sense of belonging with that skate park where you're saying under the bridge, but also is that something you looked at with the SMP? And I think all of us are familiar with SMP. I think is it the biggest one in the world? I think
yeah, it's pretty big skate park. It's
pretty big, yeah. So I think we've all seen some pretty gnarly footage of that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear maybe around some of that sense of belonging, and even in the context of obviously the Chinese culture.
Yeah, definitely. just give me so much inspiration listening to everybody sharing their experience. And from, can I also comment a little bit on what the panelists just shared beforehand? I think from my perspective, it shows the DIY spirit in creating a BMX space. I also see who has the right to use the BMX space for the riders who discover space, or for anybody who happen to know and they can use the space. And also the authenticity of the BMX riders who can use the space or who own the space, which is this kind of thoughts I noticed in my recent paper in the leisure study, where I talk about BMX sports in Wuhan, which, well, for everybody who happen to know the city, you know, it was once being hampered by the pandemic. That's where the coronavirus pandemic began. But there was so much about the city. It's a water town. It actually has a lot of water space, 2 big rivers, and also a lot of lakes. And for the DIY spirit, I noticed from the BMX rider is they ride along the rider. They ride along the rivers and they ride along the lakes, and they actually discovered a space which is an open air swimming pool at Ningbo Gate, where they have this concrete trestles, and they use the DIY spirit. They made a wooden ramp, and they kind of use the ramp to jump into the lake. So that's the DIY spirit of the Chinese BMX riders in terms of you know, how they play BMX. They find the space. I think this is a DIY spirit in Chinese BMX riders. And then in terms of the right to the BMX space, this new space they discovered in the water, and actually when they started playing, the media caught they caught attention. They caught attention of the media, and the media started to report. And many people came to the space and they jump and they don't even know about BMX. And then actually later, from a subcultural kind of cult thing, become a BMX jumping or kind of an overally jumping event. And everybody chunks in. And then the BMX organizer of the event, they got so frustrated. They actually got another jumping event just for the riders to jump, so that let the commercialize or all the irrelevant people, okay, you can do your public jump and we will do another one. So they move on, they have a second event, which I also is reckon with all the previous panelists. They talk about the rights to a space and who has the authenticity. I think I can definitely reckon with what they share, but this is a Chinese perspective, and you can see that actually Chinese BMX riders, they are very creative and they are bold, and they are using the unique geographic features of the city to find their own space to play. So that's what I just you know, want to share.
Yeah, just thank you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there about the public side of it, where, you know what, there's no one owns BMX, no one owns nothing, you know, like where you're saying just before that people were rocking up and just going off the ramp into the water, you know, that would have opened eyes to so many people where they're like, I've found my calling. This is my calling now, you know, so they're going to ride BMX now for forever, the rest of their life, you know, and that's how most people find their calling in BMX. You know, like I've met some people like growing up as well at like local skate parks, bowls, trails, wherever, and they're like, they can't do it. You know, 10 years later, they're like the best in the world, man. That's how it happens. You know, they adapt to the lifestyle of riding bikes. So yeah, but I understand exactly what you're saying about them jumping into the river, and then next minute it's now an event, you know, but then they let the other people ride the river still, you know, so that's sort of cool.
Yeah, and then sort of find their own, because I think we could probably even think of examples where there's public jumps, but then some locals have got their own jumps.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how trails like sort of start, you know, like
yeah.
As of late, I've been going to like some skate parks and whatnot, and there's just fucking kids everywhere. Like at skate parks these days, there are so many kids and parents, and it's crazy. But I don't own it. I can't tell them to leave. It's a public place. But the way I want to ride my bike at this public skate park, I can't. So therefore, I vanish into the bush and build something that I can ride. I can do what I want. If I don't feel like riding, I'll just sit there. I'm still in BMX, you know, like.
Well, yeah, and there's so many different forms, and you know, and I sort of alluded to this really early on about the difference. And again, this is something that Wade Nelson has spoken about on a podcast. You know, the difference between participation and competition, and I think, you know, it coming into the Olympics has probably changed, I think, for, you know, BMX in so many different ways. And again, I know, and Yiyin, you've written something on Chinese perceptions of BMXs, you know, post the Olympics. And it'd be interesting then to sort of hear, I guess, you know, even with these street riders or the Chinese BMX riders, you know, when they go riding, do they get asked to not ride there? Does security hassle them, or do people not care that there's just people riding their BMXs around?
What I've noticed can be contrary to BMX inclusion in the Olympics abroad is actually the Chinese BMXers, they welcome the inclusion of the Olympics. The primary reason is BMX is such a small subculture in China, and a lot of boys, they really love the sport, but they can't support their life, and they cannot find a career riding BMX. So a lot of them, they actually welcome the opportunity, and they want to use the Olympic as a way to kind of broadcast the sport, and you can get more opportunities. A lot of BMX riders that I used to interview previously, now they are teaching kids actually riding the kind of the kids bikes. That's their occupation. And without the inclusion of the Olympics, actually the parents wouldn't send their kids to learn this, because they don't even know there is the option of riding, you know, bikes for their kids, you know, as an educational means. So that's what I've noticed. And another thing in terms of rule, like ride in the open space, like on the street or other kind of restrictions. Actually, I think compared to skateboarding or BMX abroad, I think the rules are flexible. One thing is, you know, July 20th, which is the World BMX Day. And I've been on field work every year on this day. And in Shanghai, such a big city where they have a lot of BMX riders, they actually would do street bash. Like they have maybe 50 bikes. They would ride together on the street, and they're celebrating this festival. This, you know, they call it the Chinese New Year, the BMX New Year Day, and they were so happy. And actually, it works. And there was not so much restriction for them to celebrate this day. So in terms of rules, I think it's quite flexible and perhaps not so strict at the moment. And sometimes I would notice very interesting online posts of BMX riders. They actually would do a parody of they with the police. And they kind of do it in a funny way, like how the policemen were so strict and they were so chill and creative. I saw so many pictures of this kind of parody with the rule in their structured mind. And I think these are also very interesting from my online follow-up of their posts. Yeah,
interesting. And I wonder if there isn't quite the same stigma attached to BMX, because I think, especially there's quite the antisocial, you know, troublemaker, I think, idea of BMXs in our culture, but maybe not so much in China.
Yeah, in China, Yin Yang, is it because it's not so popular? Do you reckon that's why it's like out there at the moment? Do you think maybe?
Actually, I cannot give a very confirmed answer.
Okay,
but,
no, that's okay.
But actually, from my field work with Chinese BMX riders, I actually noticed their demographic is so varied. So they're actually just so what I've noticed is the demographics of the BMX.
Indy, could you mute them, please? That's the mobile number.
Okay.
Perfect.
It's the demographics of the BMX riders in China. They are actually quite varied. There are some BMX riders, they actually come from very rich family and they just love the sport. Yeah, so in terms of the stereotype, I actually don't think it's quite established, you know, as anti-social or kind of you know,
not yet.
rebel.
That word yet.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's more of a sport. It's seen more of a sport than a sort of necessarily a lifestyle or the sort of subcultural.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to ask her. Like, that's exactly right. It's because it's not popular over there yet. It's more of a sport, I'm guessing, you know, like where, as you were saying about the Olympics, you know, they're seeing it as, oh, okay, this is what we have to train for now. Where like all over the rest of the world, we ain't training, we're doing, you know, like because we're just seeing it done.
Yeah, and that's the distinction, I guess, between athletes, you know, being a BMX athlete and I don't know, just being a BMXer, I guess.
Yeah,
a BMX athlete.
Sort of blown it out of the water, you know, because now it's you're either an athlete or you ride a bike. That's just what it is, I think.
And you know, I think it's whether you train. I think this is it. Like we don't
I don't train. I just ride my bike, man.
Exactly, just right, you know. Because then even in racing, you know, you're sort of getting out training and stuff, aren't you? And sort of whereas when you go out normally, if it's for the participation stuff, is you just go out. If you feel it, you feel it. If you don't, you just sit around, maybe do a few things here or there. And just, you know, I guess connect with mates and that sort of thing. And I think what you know, and this can go to sort of Mike and Dave, you know, would you sort of prefer to ride on your own or ride with others? You know, did it make a difference to you, like being on your own, or did it help having others around?
I'll let you go, Dave.
I think we're very social beings, so it's always better with a crew. It's, I think, pretty difficult to motivate yourself. It's almost like an anomaly when you see someone who can put together like self-filmed edit or something, because, you know, firstly, it's just the struggle of that, setting your camera up and making sure you get the stuff and don't injure yourself and get stuck in the middle of nowhere, hurt with a camera filming you. And then just the motivation to do it, like not having anyone there to psych you up, G you up, celebrate with. I think that's one of the biggest joys of BMX, is having good crew to share it with, and why we go to these big lengths of building spots or DIYs or draining out pools, so we can share it with like those that we love, really, like especially with those, you know, niche parts of BMX, like building something from the ground up and then being able to be like, hey, this little curated good egg crew of people that I know I'm going to have a real good time with, you're invited, and it just, yeah, makes so much more sense. Like happiness is best shared.
And like you said, there's also the sharing of the good, but then the flip side, obviously, you know, if something goes wrong, it's good to have people there, you know, if you're knocked out and stuff, sometimes it can mean your life. But so yeah, it's a few boxes tick there. That's great, Dave. Thank you. And Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, echoing a lot of the things Dave said. Yeah, I'm always struck by, and Dan Foley is someone who seems to be really good at doing things on his own. And yeah, as you said, Doc, Dave, I'd be terrified of trying to film something on my own, for the fear of getting hurt and just being by yourself. But yeah, also, you know, it's as Dave mentioned, it's sharing it. Like that's the that's the heart of it, is it's being able to share it with someone, you know, and then you form such strong attachments with the people that are around you. You know, it always seems to come back to, it just feels like you've found this niche, this like little secret. It always feels like we've found, like, we've unlocked this the key to life, or the key to enjoying life as much as you can. And you kind of just move around in the same world as everyone else, except you feel like you found this precious, special thing. And yeah, like, why wouldn't you want to share it with other people?
Yeah,
You know?
the truth somehow. You've somehow, and once I've played as cave, I won't go into just sort of philosophical thing, but I think in some part you figure out what's good and how to tap into that, and, you know, having a good time, fun, and just that sort of sense of goodness and positivity in it when it sort of goes well, and I think. And especially for me, like building jumps and stuff early on, and then having those dozed, it made me sort of lose faith in authorities and councils, and the government, because I think, well, if they can't see that this is good and it's good, then why should I think they know what is good? And it just made me start to question, like, anyone who didn't understand things that I was sort of into, you know, and sort of, and I think, you know, there's so much misunderstanding, and like Dermo said, you know, about just sort of, I want to ride this spot, or, you know, and then people just sort of have got their thing that they want to do, and then have an issue with, you know, BMX, because I think, yeah, in some part they don't understand it, and I think you know, some of the sort of cultural stuff around it being subversive, or, you know, and I think there's a big thing, you know, with the Backbone, you know, pushing that sort of rebellion idea, and sort of pushing back, and you know, not necessarily being or doing things like, you know, normal people in some ways, and remind me of a discussion I had with Lewis Mills when we did a bit of street, went for one session with him and Flags in Melbourne, and we're sitting in Chinatown in this dingy sort of spot where the bins were there. I think people weed in some other corner, but there's this great ledge there for everyone to do ice picks and stuff, but no one would sit there otherwise. But we're just sort of sitting there and watching people sort of going past, and it's like, it's a really good riding spot, and it was rank, it was disgusting, you know, and but unless you're doing BMX, you wouldn't be there, and it's sort of, then you become sort of abnormal, and this is where I think sometimes I think that, you know, if you when you start riding BMX, you slowly become marginalized over time, because even at a skate park, you know, like, skate parks aren't for BMXs, it's skate park, and there used to be the whole thing about pegs, you know, you can't ride pegs there, and there was a whole sort of, you know, bunch of stuff. But I think, you know, it's it might be just a name, but it's, yeah, skate park, and as I said, like, it's I think then this is where BMX is really flourishing, then, is that in trails. I think at the moment, from what I can tell, there's a lot of stuff going on in trails in different spots, and a lot of localized stuff. This is where I think BMX also seems to thrive, in really small localized areas where you've got really tight-knit crew of people, and they're just sort of working together. But I just think, yeah, there's really sort of picking up on sort of what everyone's saying about the sort of belonging and identity, and sort of having that sense of place, you know, that what makes that sort of place special is, yes, you know, it is the sort of physical part there, but then it's who you ride with. And, you know, even Dermo, I think you said a curb can be something you ride, but if you've got like 4 or 5 mates who just want to have some fun and just try whatever, that curb could lead to one of the best sessions you have in months, you know, where people are just trying all sorts of stuff and mucking around, and so, you know, there's I think, like, a really equal sort of social and community sort of part of it for so many of us, you know. And Yiyin mentioned, with creativity, you know, before, and thinking about you know, that other side of creativity in BMX, not just the riding, not just the the building, but also like the filming and the designing and, you know, the holding events. And there's all of this stuff that often also goes, you know, on behind the scenes to bring people together and, you know, to hold jams and this sort of stuff. But yeah, it's really awesome to hear all of that. And I think then sort of thinking about you know, with filming and yeah, we've been talking a lot about, you know, interacting with places, interacting with people, and the meaning that comes with that. You know, like I think Mikey talked about, you know, experiences and making experiences with people and meaningful experiences. I think, you know, what role, I guess, then does like taking risks and then learning from your failures contribute to those experiences in BMX?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it seems like, you know, that's kind of, that underpins everything, right? It's like this kind of fall down, get back up. Like, it seems kind of basic, but it's such an important lesson to help you build a sense of resilience, and then, you know, apply that to anything else in life. Like, you just become good at solving problems and, you know, putting yourself in sketchy situations and being able to deal with it. I've certainly, it's taken a while. I think it's almost taken me to get out of BMX in a sense. You know, I'm never going to be out of it, but I'm not like I used to be. I kind of understand these concepts a little in more deeper. Like, one anecdote that often comes to mind is like I work in an office, in a kind of corporate office, with people, like upper middle class type people. I remember like walking to get a coffee one day, and then walking through this park, and there's a bunch of like, you know, less fortunate people, and they're kind of like, you know, you can get the sense that they're like, it's almost like you veer off, you know, you veer away, and I'm like in like fear. There's like a sense of fear, or like, you know, where don't go near that person. He's you know, dangerous or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like you, as we've talked about, you end up finding yourself in these yeah sketchy environments, and it just helps you to see the world more broadly and take things in from a different perspective, and understand that, you know, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is it helps you to see the world in a different way, not be fearful, and just have this strong sense of resilience. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
I really like that. You know, the problem solving, working through challenges is awesome. Like, I really love how there's a bunch of dudes that I used to go on road trips with, and, you know, you can have the wildest night, sleep on nothing, and then get up the next morning, eat nothing, and then you're into like doing crazy stuff. Like, it's ridiculous, but that is what it is. You know, you kind of don't even think about it. Just, you know, it's awesome.
yeah, just feeding on good vibes, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, 100%, 100% about the good vibes. You know, like a normal person would go out and do what we would do, like bender hard, and we're up at 9 eating and shredding. Where the average person, they ain't gonna do that. They're gonna lay in their bed all day. You know, like it's, yeah.
bit of a tangent, Mike, but I feel like with what the topic is here, BMX in place, how has like you're in town planning now? How do you feel like BMX has influenced that work you do there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I wish it would have more influence than it might do. I mean, I don't get to design places, but like, for instance, today, you know, we're delivering this park in this new estate, and we're delivering a pump track, and part of that is, you know, in planning words, we're trying to make it unique and distinctive and more complex. And I guess under that complexity banner, you might get to suggest to the developer how you need to build this section works for a beginner, and then build another section over here for a more experienced demographic. LC.
She's already with him. She did the roller coaster.
So I guess I do get to imbue my background in that space, not as much as I would like. It's in another sense, I get to potentially help some of the other project managers understand how that can be a positive thing. Like, for example, where our building is again a new kind of city centre, and there's all this public space with ledges and interesting things to ride, and the landscape designers and getting the shits with this. There's a bunch of skaters and bikers that come in, and they're scratching it up and doing the things that the general society doesn't like. But you can kind of explain, hey, well, it's also a good thing, right? Like it's this new space where there's not many people around. It's an emerging space. Eventually, though, it'll be quite busy because it's a city centre. But at the moment, we're trying to activate it and encourage people to come in, but there's not much there. So the fact that there is skaters coming in, in the afternoon when things die down a little bit, that's a good thing. Like that's you're starting to build an energy to it. You're bringing a sense of safety through this kind of SSHRED, like crime prevention through environmental design type thing. And you can, in a way, I'm not going to say I'm having a major influence, but you can just drop little tidbits here, and oh yeah, maybe that is not such a bad thing to have them around,
Yeah, and I think you're right. Yeah, and getting people to engage with those spaces is really important. But there's often ideas around, what normal engagement is it and what it isn't, and if the design in itself was, skate or rider safe, then there wouldn't be the damage. Like, so if there's the consideration up front, then it would be far less problematic. And you sort of foreshadowed the next question, Dave, and I think it's a really good one, especially because of Mike's sort of background, and it would be good to hear from you, Dave, around some of the risk and the failure, but also thinking about future urban design and what that might look like, and I'm happy to open it to Dermo also around the risk and the failure, but go for it either.
I just want to say one thing that I think is unique to Australia is we seem to cherish our private property. I've just been speaking to a guy who's been traveling around Asia at the moment, and he just made the point of how much public space exists in Southeast Asia. I think in Australia we're not so good at that. We tend to love building fences and separating, disjointing things, such that. But I think that's a lot of the things you want to ride are in public spaces, because you kind of want to build interesting, unique environments, and that's where these spaces come out of. So that's why we end up finding ourselves jumping fences, like being experts at jumping pointy 2 meter high, Department of Education type fences. That's where you just forced to go into those spaces. I just wanted to highlight that from a kind of an earlier discussion.
Definitely. Because the infrastructure that is built, even with the skate parks, it can be really limiting, and doesn't really cater for different ages. And even near my house, they've built a youth space and they've put a basketball court there and a pump track, and the berms, like the turns on the pump track, are probably 60 centimeters high. Like it's like a youth space, and I was like, youth is up to 25, like it's not just for bloody little kids. And so I think, a lot of the skate parks infrastructures don't cater necessarily for different riders, but even if that skill level, I just don't like riding concrete. For me, it just hurts. I just want dirt, and I prefer, if I'm going to, because I've got the kids and work, if I've got time, I'm going to go dig or ride. But going to a skate park, I don't see it as a worthwhile use of my time, because I get hurt every time. I land flat on a quarter or bloody do something, and it always hurts. So for me, I try to sort of to sort of go in that way. But for me, the risk isn't sort of quite there. And I can't remember who I was listening to the other day. They were talking about even just as you get older, doing tricks at sort of, riding at 70% or 80%, or if there's tricks you don't sort of land all the time, you sort of start to sort of get rid of them and, be a bit more selective, I guess. And I guess, throwing it to you, Dave, I guess about that around risk and failure. For you, what's your sort of thoughts on that?
I think I've been pretty good, knock wood, at self-preservation by kind of like the style of riding that I've always been into. I've never been one to go and do big tricks or ginormous handrails or anything. Like flow or style kind of riding has always been what's influenced me, and as long as you're like staying within your skill set, it's a lot harder to hurt yourself. So that and that extends on to what you ride. Like I remember Mike actually made a video about me many years ago about how I just go to the bowl and whip around really fast, and I'm like, hell yeah, like that's all I do. Like just whip around the bowl corners, because once you start doing 8-foot airs out of that bowl, the opportunity to case and break your wrists or whatever, it's a lot higher. So I think also even with like the jumps I build, like Dermo came through and was like, dude, spot's unreal, so fun, so small and cute. And I'm like, yeah, that's fully the vibe with the spot. Like there's no jumps bigger than like 6 foot long or anything, and has helped grow a really nice scene of like younger crew. There's no crew in Wollongong. If you're out there listening, please come and find me and ride some jumps and build some jumps.
There is no crew in Wollongong at all.
Like there are crew. Good, I love them, but they're all like 40 and 45 and have kids and stuff, so they can't come and build jumps. And
that's no crew.
Well, they rule, that crew rule, but they're not as like infected with BMX as like these 16-year-olds that are coming down my jumps currently, that are all mountain like bikes, slowly turning from mountain bikes to BMX. But I think it's a good one with like trail spots, and even with skate parks. You go to like the skate parks in southeast Queensland, a lot of those like 12-foot deep bowls that are just nuts. They're often pretty quiet. There'll be like, Cody Pollard doing like a 12-foot air out of it, and then like 3 other crew. But you go to like around the corner to like Sauk Park, I think it's called, this little kind of almost like a DIY style park with like bowls and quarters everywhere, but nothing over like 4 foot. And it's just like overrun. Everyone's there because it's like the risk is not nearly as gnarly, and I feel like the fun factor can be for most people a lot higher if you can just jib around and learn new things and not have to do it on like an 8 or 9 foot tall ramp.
Dermo?
Yo, sorry, I just had to duck out. My family come home, so I sort of had to send them out to get some dinner and stuff. So
good. That's all right. No, it's okay. We're just talking about sort of failure and taking risks and stuff. Is that something you've done in the past, taking risks on your BMX?
Oh, no. I'm probably the most cautious BMX rider. Like, if I think I can't do it, I will not do it at all.
That's a lie.
No, I'm being serious, 100%. Like, but there's that point where, like, I'll go ride somewhere, but I'll be like, oh, I'm going to just do like a straight double bar of that or something. But somebody's like, dude, you're warming up, or something like that. That's my risk because I know I can do it. But if someone's like, do 180 double bar of that, I'm like, I'm not doing that, like I can't, because that's me knowing that there's a risk involved, So, but yeah, it's definitely risky what we do, like 100%. So.
It's the beauty of it ultimately, it's like coming back to, it's like, identifying a problem, figuring out how to work through it, and like figuring out how to challenge yourself and work through that. And it's it's the feeling of, looking at it and going, yeah, okay, my brain has lined everything up and linked this up, and it's definitely possible. But if I don't get this right, then I'm definitely going to hospital.
Oh yeah. And
then, if you succeed, then that's the greatest feeling ever. And if you don't, you get hurt, and that kind of sucks, but also you've got to you got a cool story, and you've got you got some, you bank in some memories, and you feel like you're still a winner. But yeah, I think that's in the past for me as well. Something has flipped in my mind. I mean, it's not a surprise, I guess, with kids and a house and that, but yeah, it definitely has influenced how I ride these days. I'm kind of, to what Dave C said, I'm kind of influenced more by the jibby, animal, crusty kind of style, like looking for just ruined or damaged kind of things, and just kind of make cool sounds and put your bike where it shouldn't go. And not that I'm, I've been doing it much or good at it, but that's kind of where my head's at. It's just a lower level risk, you can manage it better. Yeah.
Speaking of risk, speaking of risk also, though, what is wrong with us? We will hit a wall at max 10. We will break a leg. We will break a back, or we'll do something that stupid. And then I'll be like, fuck, I can't wait to get back on my bike and do that again. That's that risk. What is wrong with us? Is there something wrong with us by saying that, like we're hurting ourselves and going, yeah, I'm getting back up, man, I'm doing this, like that's probably the biggest risk, because what if you don't get back up, as well? So look at like Aitken and, Scotty Cranmer and stuff. They weren't even risking it, and then now they're done. Well, no, they're not done. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but, they don't ride to how they want to ride because they can't. So risk is massive.
Yiyin?
Actually, there is nothing wrong about you.
Yeah.
I find in Chinese BMX riders here as well. I just want to add a interesting episode to the discussion of risks. When I was doing field work in Shanghai, I get to know a boy, and his nickname is actually Collarbone King. That's his nickname, Collarbone King. So in Chinese, it's 锁骨王. And I was so curious. I said, why you have this name? And he was so proud. And he said, once I was doing a trick and I broke my collarbone. And after that, everybody started to call me Collarbone King. And he said that so proudly, and it feels he gets so much respect from this injury, which I noticed is something about the hierarchy of the BMX subculture, at least in China, is, the kind of bravery and the kind of daring spirit is actually considered to be a very important, I think, subcultural capital in terms of entering the subculture. Like, he was so proud, and it is something, difficult to understand for someone who didn't do it. I guess, Dermo, you understand it, right? And you're not alone.
Yeah, that's right. It's just
about you.
It always goes through my head, like where, I'm lying in bed with a broken foot, and I'm like, 6 weeks to go, and I'm just like, fuck, it's 1 week, it's 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks, like hurry up so I can get back on my bike and hurt myself again, but when you get older as well, you don't, necessarily want to take that risk. All you want is reward, so you start to slow down and whatnot, and you go from there.
Yeah, obviously the reward outweighs the risk, and I think you also, I think really early on when you start riding, you do an apprenticeship in falling and dealing with pain. And I think, I don't know, it's 4 or 5 years or something, I don't know, where it's just like, you fall, and obviously you're always falling, but you figure out how to fall, you figure out how to sort of move on from the pain, and how to just sort of to get on with it, and then to sort of limp, and sort of get on with it. But it is difficult, Mike, to carry the baby when you're limping, and it's just sore as and all that sort of stuff. But it's really interesting, I think, with sort of BMXs, and like Indy said, with skaters, I think it's with lifestyle sports, you still do it while you're injured. Whereas if you're a footy player, if you've got I don't know, some injury, you usually probably rest until it's sort of fixed again. Whereas, if you're a BMXer, it's like, well, I'm not just riding because it's a sport. I'm riding because it's my sort of meditative practice. You know, it's my well-being, it's my physical stuff, it's my creativity, all this sort of stuff. So you figure out a way to just do it, just in a way to be there and to participate and just to hang out with people or whatever. But then you also learn really quickly how to bandage stuff, how to use Nurofen, how to use Panadol, and all these other sorts of things, you know. And I think lately, when with the technology, people got massage guns and all sorts of things now. But I think, yeah, it's something that, you know, as you're saying with the collarbone king, I think that it is a bit of a badge of honor to when you have a really gnarly fall, you know, and in our research we asked about failure and the role of falling and all that sort of stuff, but there was sort of almost a bit of a scale of, you know, it's okay to fall. Falling and bleeding, it's okay. Falling, bleeding, ideally no hospital. But if it's hospital, maybe it's stitches, not a broken bone. If it's a broken bone, then no surgery, just a cast. So there's all these sort of different like levels of injury, you know, and if you've got it on film, then that's even better because you've sort of got it there as a record, you know, and it can either be the opening or an ending of a part or something, you know, something awesome like that. So it is really interesting, I think, thinking about failure then in comparison to other sports, like, you know, if you're playing, and I guess even in BMX, you know, falling, I guess even in the Olympics or in a big competition where you might lose that place. But I think if you went for a trick that's never been done in the Olympics and you fell, it would be different to someone in tennis who tried to do a shot and they lost the championship because they tried this new shot. I think in BMX, people will still give you respect and credit for going for it at that time, putting it on the risk, whereas they would say this tennis player is probably, I don't know, there's something wrong with them and they need to, I don't know, get some sort of rehab or counselling or something. But you understand, I think with that.
Yeah, I understand what you mean by that. Yeah, definitely.
I'm not even sure what even is. I don't even what even is failing in BMX. You know, like
there's no such
crashing is like that's not. I don't even know if I'd categorize it as a failure. It's just like that's just part of it. Like it's just an interesting thing to kind of break down, Dave. I think because if you try and if you're giving it a go, then that's giving it a go can look like a lot of things as well. You know, you might be really good, or you might be okay, or you might suck. It's not a failure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right,
Mike.
Mike. I noticed in the skateboarding world, there's a term and they call them posers. You know, whereas like I see what you're saying, you're in there and you're having a go, like in the BMX scene, and everyone from they could be 5 now to 60, you're giving them a go. It doesn't matter, you know, but like in the skate world, if you're like trying to do that, they class you as a poser or something like that, like where you're like a fake person trying to do it. But I believe we don't see people like that in the BMX world. BMX is cooler, guys. Come and do BMX.
As you're saying, if someone tries really hard, they keep sending it, but they keep trying to send it, but they're not achieving it, then they're seen as like a poser or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, like where like people like rock up to like a spot or a skate park, and they sort of just, you know, they got all the gear. Roughly, what I'm trying to say.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
You're trying to leverage the benefits without being genuine.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Where in the BMX industry, our world, there's nothing like that really, you know, like that I've seen anyway in like a long time. So
yeah, interesting. And I think it's, you know, giving it a go in that way. And I think the way you're saying that failure isn't necessarily failure, and I guess like we're saying, is it's almost like a stepping stone to sort of somewhere else. And you know, maybe you know, failing is not trying anymore in that sort of sense. But I think there's definitely tricks, you know, that take people years, and you know, if never, I don't know, some people never get a trick, or I know there's some tricks I've never sort of got, no matter how many times I've tried, and sort of pull the pin after a while because you sort of get over it. But I'm just looking at the time and I'm seeing that we're sort of coming close to the end of those sort of discussion points. I think we'll, in a couple of minutes, we'll open up to some questions, and we'll hear what some of the non-panelists are thinking. But I think just to sort of give a quick summary, we spoke about at the start, I guess, the environment, the physical environment, but also the social and the cultural environment, and the ways in which different physical spaces sort of attract us to ride. And even though there might be other sort of barriers like fences and laws and this sort of stuff, it sort of doesn't mean that's sort of a reason not to ride something. And but then also talking about that tension between something being public but also sort of hidden and a secret, and sort of that being also really special, and then sort of linking it into the community and the identity. When you're a part of something like that, it makes you feel special, and I think that also something that we didn't necessarily talk about is, when you go down to your local skate park and people know you and recognize you there, it also gives you that sort of sense of identity and the belonging, and in some part feeling special, I think, which is really important. And then we just sort of came to just now talking about going from that sense of belonging and place and identity, and thinking about the community and the sort of types of interactions and feeding off each other and encouraging each other, but then also the sort of risk and the resilience that comes with sort of riding BMX, not just the riding of the BMX, but also to actually get to the riding part of riding the BMX, be it building or finding spots or traveling 7 hours because you want to go ride some damn wall or something like this. So the sort of, I guess, the BMXer is formed not just by the riding, but getting to the riding and all of that other stuff. And we did sort of touch on urban design a little bit, just sort of hearing from Mike, but and it might come up again, but we're just talking about then, different places and how they aren't necessarily designed to cater for uses other than very narrow things like sitting down and talking to people, and not really much else. And I think there has been a shift, with some of this stuff in terms of gyms and doing exercise equipment and these sorts of things, but not really anything that's more sort of conducive to necessarily BMX. But I'm just imagining some of those plaza space, style skate parks. But anyway, so I think it's a bit of a summary there. And we can open up to questions. Just happy to hear from anyone. And we did talk about risk, and Adam's just got something there, team sports. One thing that I do find interesting about BMX actually with risk, and especially with trails and stuff, is you get to become really familiar with what's around, and you can remove a lot of that stuff, if it's branches and trees and all this sort of stuff. So